Got that? Good.
He got
Mr. Ray? Yes, mic check.
1, 2, 3.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, that's good. Okay. Tessa?
Mic check. 1, 4, 5.
Folks can see this?
This is the big debate, CD-2 2022.
This is Decision 2022 on KOB4. Tonight, the New Mexico 2nd Congressional District debate with Republican Representative Yvette Herrell and Democratic challenger Gabe Vasquez. Now, our moderators, Tessa Mentis and Matt Grubbs.
Well, good evening, New Mexico. We are, if you can believe it, 18 days away from Election Day. I'm Matt Grubbs.
If you're keeping count. And I'm Tessa Mentis. This election, New Mexicans get to decide who will represent us in Congress. In past years, our 3 districts were divided among really the north half of our state, the south half, and then the metro.
But this year, District 2, one of the most hotly contested seats in the country, not only covers large portions of southern New Mexico, but a significant chunk of Albuquerque's west side and the South Valley. Running
to represent this district is incumbent Republican Yvette Herrell. Opposing her tonight is Democrat Gabe Vasquez.
They are both joining us here at KOB4 tonight in our studio. Here are the rules for our candidates. They have agreed upon them. They each have 90 seconds to introduce themselves. Then they have 60 seconds to answer our questions.
We want to encourage conversation about our topics tonight, so they'll each have 30 seconds for rebuttal. After that, it's up to us, the moderators, to decide if something needs more clarification or more conversation. Finally, each candidate will have 60 seconds to deliver closing remarks.
Thanks to you both for being here. We flipped a coin to determine the order of opening and closing statements. Representative Yvette Herrell, you will begin.
Great. Matt, Tessa, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm Yvette Herrell, and I have been so honored to be the voice of the 2nd Congressional District. You know, I served in the New Mexico House before I went to Congress, so it gave me a platform and the relationships that I needed so I could hit the ground running day one, taking your voices with me. I am blessed because I am a small business owner, so I know what it feels like to sign the front of a paycheck, and I know what these policies are doing in Washington, D.C. It is hurting small business. Look, I grew up in New Mexico, born and raised here. I grew up in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, so I know what it's like to come from a very rural community, but I also know the challenges of our large communities. I'm proud of my work across the aisle. I've worked with my Democratic colleagues. I've worked to bring money back to the people touched by the fire, to ensure that we have water resources available. I've worked to ensure that those that worked in the uranium mines and downwinders have the tools and the money they need from the federal government. And we're working on water settlement agreements right now. But as I've traveled around the district and really listened to voters, here's what I know. We want a nation that has a strong economy, a nation that's safe. We want to protect our freedom so our kids have the same opportunities as we did. And we want to make sure that we live in a country that celebrates the Constitution. These changes can take place because one-party rule isn't working. I'm Yvette Herrell, and I look forward to this debate this evening.
Thank you, Representative Herrell. Mr. Gabe Vasquez, you may go now.
Good evening, and thank you so much to KOB. Buenas noches a los nuevos mexicanos. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes y ser su candidato para el segundo distrito de Nuevo Mexico. This is one of the most beautiful and diverse districts, one of the districts with the most opportunity in this country. And as I've traveled around, not just for the last year, but since I've been working for the people of New Mexico, I have one thing that's very clear. We need representation that is going to work for our working families, for our teachers, for nurses, for people who are now working in the film industry, for people who are looking for a better opportunity for their families. And that's the reason that I'm running. My grandfather, my abuelo Javier Bañuelos, he came to the U.S.-Mexico border with the promise of a better life. And he started out as a mailman and then later opened up a TV repair shop that provided for 10 of his children. And one of those kids was my mom. My mom gave me the opportunity to be an American citizen. And with that came the weight and the responsibility to help fulfill those dreams. And that meant that the American dream means you should be able to afford health care in this country, that you should be able to have the freedom to make your own decisions about your own body in this country, that you should be able to be paid a fair wage, no matter whether you're working at a fast food restaurant or you're working at a hospital. It's so critically important that this economy works for everybody. That's what the American dream means to me. That's what it meant to my family. That's why I'm running for this seat. Thank you so much, and I look forward to this debate.
Mr. Vasquez, thank you. Okay, our first topic concerns our border with Mexico. America is seeing record interactions with people trying to cross into our country. Some of them are trying to smuggle drugs or people, but many others are looking for a better life here. What is your assessment of the situation on the border, and what can one member of Congress do to help address border issues? Mr. Vasquez, will you begin with you?
Absolutely. Well, listen, this is the second largest border district in New Mexico, and whoever represents this district has a deep responsibility to be able to work across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion to help reform our broken immigration system. Now, it's been far too long since Congress has been actually able to work on legislation that will meaningfully reform a system that hasn't worked for anybody. In New Mexico, immigration is part of who we are. It's the fabric of who we are, not just as a state, but as a country. Now, we see that with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we see that with the Gadsden Purchase, and we see that in our agricultural economy, and our restaurant economy, our hospitality economy. We know that immigrants make our country better, and we need to make sure that we do better in Congress. So, unfortunately, my opponent hasn't been able to work on comprehensive solutions working across the aisle in the last 2 years. It's the duty of the person representing this district to work on those solutions.
Representative Herrell, it is your turn, 60 seconds.
Well, there's absolutely no doubt at all. The persons winning the war on the open border are the cartel, and it's imperative that we work to secure the southern border. We absolutely must stop this human trafficking, the trafficking of fentanyl. Look how many people have died from overdose over the last year because of illegal drugs, and mostly fentanyl, but nobody's talking about that. I've stood up and stood for the border, stood for securing the border, to provide the Border Patrol the tools they need. We also need to put back into play the policies we know work. Title 42, Remain in Mexico policies, but we have to do more to secure our sovereignty and the communities that live in and around the border. The cost to the American people, no one wants to talk about it. It's in the billions. We are a great country of immigration, and that's what we're built on, but we need to do a better job of working to secure our national border and secure our national sovereignty.
Mr. Vasquez, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Well, when I worked for Senator Martin Heinrich, I was the chair of the Southwest Border Security Task Force and actually worked directly with our patrol agent-in-chief in places like Lordsburg and in Deming. And I understand the issues that we have at the border, but we must work together in a bipartisan manner to have a predictable and a humane immigration system. And when it comes to stopping the drugs from coming into this country, 90% of them come from our ports of entry. That means we must fund the technology that it takes to be able to detect drugs at places like Santa Teresa and Columbus, and work with our partners in other ports of entry to make sure that that happens. That's something I'm willing to do.
Mr. Vasquez, thank you. Representative Herrell, you also have 30 seconds.
Yeah, let's be very clear. My opponent said he wants to melt the ICE. ICE is immigration and in customs enforcement. These are the agencies we need on the border to protect our small communities and to protect our American people. I mean, every state's a border state. There's been no willingness to work together, and it's a problem, and we have to solve it. It means closing our border down to make sure immigration is done properly, not illegally. We can't afford more of the same, and that's why I want to be your voice in Washington.
Thank you both. Our next topic concerns a phrase both of your supporters have used: my body, my choice. For some people, that phrase refers to vaccine mandates and only vaccine mandates, and for other people, it refers to abortion and only abortion. Our question to you is, should it apply in both cases? And Representative Herrell, you get to answer first.
Well, I'll take it as an abortion question first. Everybody knows that I am pro-life, with the exception of rape, incest, and to save the life of the mother. And I also believe in terms of the vaccination. People should be able to make their own decisions. But it is quite interesting that during the pandemic, you know, we were being forced to take the vaccination. Our military personnel were being forced to take the vaccination. So the my body, my choice narrative didn't quite work. And that's part of the hypocrisy we see in Washington, D.C. We need to give people the ability to make their own decisions. Congress should not be mandating these things. In fact, the people that send us to Washington, our bosses, they have the ability to make the choices for themselves and their families that work for them. And too often we see these policies being shoved down everyone's throat without any regard to how it affects the American people. We can do better, and everybody should have a voice in this matter.
Congresswoman, thank you. Mr. Vasquez, your thoughts?
Thank you. Well, first I have to say, I was raised by a strong single mother. I was raised by powerful women in my life who I would never want to make a decision about their own health care decisions that they make here in New Mexico or abroad. And so there's so much more at stake than CD-2 when we talk about the stakes of this election. We have to make sure that politicians don't interfere with the decisions that women are making with their family, with their faith, and with their doctor. That is so incredibly important. And we have seen that extreme Trump Republicans have supported a Supreme Court decision that has now reversed 50 years of precedent for women's health care rights. To me, this is just completely wrong. This is taking us back to a time in our country where women didn't have their full health care rights. So I will make sure that when I get to Congress, I will codify Roe versus Wade. I will make sure that women have their rights restored, and that we will support fully the ability of women to make those decisions with their doctors and with their family and according to their faith.
Mr. Vasquez, thank you. Congresswoman, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal here.
Great. Well, I do agree with the Dobbs decision. As a matter of fact, it did not change any of New Mexico's abortion laws, and it didn't deny access to abortion for any woman. And I think it's sad that we use a topic that is so, like Gabe said, personal and should be made between a woman, their family, their doctor, and use it for political gain. We need to allow the people closest, the legislative branch, closest to the people to make these decisions. I support life, and I think that it's sad that we're using this as a political gain. And most people that even say that pro-choice is their way to go don't support abortion on demand, taxpayer-funded abortion, or abortion on the day of birth.
Thank you, Representative Herrell. Mr. Vasquez, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Well, listen, my opponent's record has been clear on this, and even though she has changed her stance over the course of the last several months, she's voted and supported 3 times in a row and co-sponsored bills that don't have exceptions for rape or for incest or for the life of the mother. That is the truth. That is the record that we are facing. We cannot afford that. I value freedom in this country. And that means that women in this country have to have the ability to make their own health care decisions. It shouldn't be left up to the states. It should be a decision that should be decided at the national level to make sure that every woman, whether they're in New Mexico or Arizona or Texas or any other state, have an opportunity to make that decision.
Mr. Vasquez, thank you. Our next question is on controversial positions. You've both supported positions out of step with many voters in your district, whether that's voting to not accept election results, Representative Herrell, or implying looting and burning buildings were somehow part of rebuilding a system. Mr. Vasquez, how do you explain those political positions to voters who believe they're extreme? Mr. Vasquez, you may answer first.
Well, first, thank you for that question. Since I have had the privilege of being a public servant, one of the things I've prided myself in is being a public servant and standing with my community. That's so incredibly important to me, to be able to serve folks, especially during some of the most trying times in our country. Now, I don't support the looting. I don't support defunding the police. I don't support any of the riots that have happened in this country. But those are reactions to things that are happening in this country that we should be able to work on. Now, we have to stop the divisive politics that are happening in Washington, D.C., in our local communities and be able to come together and work together. Now, the truth is that for 4 years in a row, I voted to support and fund our police to the tune of $3.2 million and adding nearly 24 police officers to the police force in Las Cruces. So that is the truth. That is what I believe in. We have to make sure that we have a civil system of government in this country. Now, the only person, the only candidate who's actually voted to fund the police is Congresswoman Herrell. Now, all you have to look at is her last 2 years in Congress, and you'll see that those votes are clear.
Thank you. Representative Herrell, your response.
Well, thank you for the question. And as a member of Congress, I have a duty to take concerns that are risen to the congressional level in terms of not certifying the election and get those results back to the state so they can review them in their legislative branches. Listen, it's no surprise Democrats and Republicans for years have not certified the election. But what I want to talk about is defunding the police. Gabe Vasquez, you were on TV talking about defunding the police, dismantling the police, defunding the system. You actually voted against grant funding that your police department asked you to pass. This is the Stone Garden grants. This would have given money to the police department so that they could work on federal issues, so they could help stop human trafficking, drug trafficking. You voted against that even when the chief of police asked for that funding to be put into play, and it had been there for 10 years. So when you're saying you're all for police, you need to go back and look at your Twitter posts, you need to go back and look at Facebook, and you need to review the TV hit that you did.
Representative Herrell, thank you. Mr. Vasquez, 30 seconds here.
Well, thank you so much. Well, if we were running for Congress to talk about our Twitter posts, then this would be a much easier race. But the truth is that we're running for Congress to represent and bring funding to the people of New Mexico and to keep them safe. Now, that grant that Congresswoman Herrell is talking about, actually replaced that money the next city council session that we had. And I have supported our police. I was the co-chair of our public safety committee and met with our police chief. I am incredibly grateful to the public service that I've had in working hand in hand with police. Now, Congresswoman Herrell actually voted against prosecuting the folks who invaded our Capitol on January 6th. One of the first votes that she took was to decertify the election after a bloody coup and insurrection that took the lives of 5 police officers.
Vasquez, we're out of time here. Congresswoman, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. No one condones what happened on January 6th. I certainly didn't, and those who trespass should be held accountable. And that's what's happening now. But let's be honest, when we're talking about police and defunding them, we don't have to look very far but to look at Gabe's record on TV, on Facebook, and on his social media posts.
Thank you very much. The next topic is a big one for District 2. The oil and gas industry makes up a big part of your district's economy. How do you balance its significance with the push for alternative sources of energy? And Representative Herrell, you get to start this one.
Great. Well, I'm an all of the above energy person, but I'm also a realist, and we have to unleash American energy. It's the best thing we can be doing for not only America, but for our allies around the world. Look, we know we produce energy more efficiently, cleaner, and more affordably than anywhere else in the world, and our emissions are lower than the next 7 countries combined. So it's about environment. Why are we asking Saudi Arabia or other OPEC nations to produce oil for us when we can do it right here and protect the 130,000 jobs that go with it? This is money that goes right back into the state budget, goes into the classrooms. Our teachers need it, our students need it, infrastructure needs it. We have to be careful about what we're looking at globally, because energy independence is something that is so vital. It touches every part of our lives. It will help us get back on track, push the costs of fuel down, get our supply chains working again. We can't afford not to be energy independent, and we can do it very responsibly. We've proven that in the state of New Mexico.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Vasquez, your response.
Thank you. Well, look, I fully support our oil and gas workers in the southeast part of New Mexico and in this district. Our pipe fitters, our welders, our truck drivers, our small businesses that help support the industry. They provide so much to their communities and also to our state budget. It's so incredibly important that we keep this industry solvent. Now, the difference between myself and my opponent is that we can actually be a bigger energy champion in this country. We can have a 2-track approach that includes unlocking the renewable energy potential that we have here, especially in southeast New Mexico. That means battery, that means storage, that means transmission, that means places like Capitan and Artesia and Carlsbad and Eunice can have twice the energy jobs that they have today. However, we also have to make sure that we hold oil and gas companies accountable. We have seen the largest profits and the largest windfall profits come to oil and gas CEOs and shareholders that are not from New Mexico, but are profiting from New Mexico. And those profits aren't going to our workers. So we need to make sure that that is a fair economy that benefits New Mexicans first.
Mr. Vasquez, thank you. Representative, 30 seconds for a rebuttal.
Yeah, we have to be realistic about this. We need traditional energy sources to even meet some of these green programs that are coming out. But at the end of the day, we don't have to go very far again to see your quote, Gabe, that says it's time to shut it all down, eradicate it, stop fracking. Look, you can't play both sides of the fence here. We can have traditional energy that is affordable and clean and help drive the price of fuel down at the gas pump, or we can have somebody who denies what they're saying, and we can't trust that in Washington, D.C.
Mr. Vasquez, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Thank you. Well, first, I just got to say, you know, I'm disappointed, and I hear this disappointment all across this district. Congresswoman Herrell voted against holding the oil gouging companies accountable. It's true that we are facing record inflation, but at the same time, oil and gas companies are facing record profits. We've seen it, and we need to make sure that those profits come down to the people of New Mexico and not to shareholders in Houston, Texas. We are here to represent Congressional District 2, the workers, and a energy industry that can work for everybody, and that's what I represent.
Thank you both. Our next topic concerns our elections. Do American elections deliver reliable, secure results? Why or why not? And what changes, if any, would you make to the current system? Mr. Vasquez, you may go first.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, you know, it's unfortunate that we have the level of uncertainty in our elections that was caused by our last president, somebody who my opponent was proud to be endorsed by, but also somebody that has really damaged the fundamental trust that we have in the electorate system that the American people have believed in for so many years. Yes, we need to make sure that elections are fair, but we also need to make sure that we fully deny what happened on January 6th, that we need to make sure that we fully deny that this is a wrong path for America to go down, because it has divided our communities, it has divided our country, and unfortunately Congresswoman Herrell has been part of that division. She says one of her proudest accomplishments was being endorsed by Coy Griffin, a disgraced county commissioner from Otero who has now been disbarred, who now can no longer serve in public office because he was an election denier too. And so we need to make sure that we root out the election denialism that exists in this country, because our country won't survive if we don't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Representative Herrell, your response, 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm proud to have been a co-sponsor of the Save Our Democracy Act, because voters all over the country, and it doesn't matter the party, they want fair and transparent elections, and that's what we need to be focused on. There has always been questions about the integrity of the election system, but we can work through that, and we can work with our states, partner with our state legislative branches to make sure that we are seeing a transparent election cycle happen. When questions rise, though, to the members of Congress, we have no choice but to look at those. It's important, though, to note that I do agree with Gabe. People want fair and transparent elections. But last time I checked, Coy Griffin wasn't on the ballot for this race. And so I don't know what his endorsement 2 years ago has to do with anything we're talking about this evening.
Mr. Vasquez, you have up to 30 seconds for rebuttal if you'd like it.
Thank you. Well, look, the choice is clear. We can choose to support an election denier in 2020, or we can choose to support somebody that believes in the American dream and an electorate system and one of the best democracies, representative democracies in the world, right? It's so important because when I look at the integrity of who we are as a people, it is rooted, and the foundation is in our election, in our electorate system. Now, we can no longer pretend like the actions that happened on January 6th happened, you know, due to happenstance. It was absolutely purposeful to deny the election of Joe Biden as our president.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Congresswoman Herrell, 30 seconds.
Thank you. You know what? We live in the greatest country in the world, and we have a right to vote. And I would just hope that everybody would exercise their right to vote on November 8th. It's very important, and we have this opportunity to change the course of history and to make major changes in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. One more question here before we get to our closing remarks. Our next discussion is on crime. The 2nd Congressional District includes urban areas like Las Cruces and Albuquerque, but plenty of rural areas too. And what we want to know is, because crime is not the same in these places, how do you view the district's crime problems, and what is the federal role in fighting them? Representative Herrell, you start.
Thank you. There is no doubt crime is on the rise, not only in the state of New Mexico, but around the nation. I've been able to go around the district and meet with law enforcement officers, police departments, sheriff departments, and it is a problem because, number one, they don't have enough people on their force. Number two, there are all these unfunded mandates that have been placed on the backs of our law enforcement officers, and we should be standing shoulder to shoulder with them and supporting them. And just recently, before we got out to recess, I was proud to vote for a bipartisan bill that would have given grant opportunities to the smaller police departments, which is very crucial for rural New Mexicans, especially when we see these departments that, again, don't have the manpower that they need. This bill actually will give money for recruitment, retention, for mental health treatments, for equipment and things that we need. But look, what we have to be doing is supporting the police, not defunding them like Gabe Vasquez wants to do. You saw him on TV. It's time to defund the police, dismantle the police. We can't have that. We can either have a safe neighborhood, a safe community, a safe nation, or not.
Congresswoman, thank you. Mr. Vasquez, your thoughts on crime?
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, let's just get the record straight. I don't support defunding the police, and my record shows that. And we are running for office based on our records, not on what was said on TV or what was said on Twitter. Secondly, I just want to say that fighting crime in our communities involves a holistic approach that includes giving people good paying jobs, creating an economy that works for everybody, allowing our children in New Mexico to grow up in healthy and happy families, and having an economy that works for everybody. And that means providing equitable access to health care and education and opportunities for families to thrive. Now, my opponent, unfortunately, again, is the only one who has voted to defund the police. She has been unable in the last 2 years in her record in Congress to actually support policies that would fund both Border Patrol and our police officers. She's also voted against mental health care for our youth. She's voted against veterans and receiving health care for toxic exposed veterans. I mean, we have to make sure that we have somebody in Congress that's actually going to do the things that they say and not just the things that are going to get them elected.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. Congresswoman, 30 seconds here.
Great. I think one of the things we could be focusing on is stop this no cash bail. We also need to hold criminals accountable. Right now it feels as though we're celebrating criminal acts and then vilifying those that are trying to protect their livelihoods, their property, their families. It's time that we stand in contrast to what Gabe Vasquez stands for and actually fund our police, support our police, and make sure they have the tools necessary to keep our communities safe.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Vasquez, 30 seconds here.
Well, look, we absolutely need a robust and well-trained police force at our local departments, at the local level. That's why I was the co-chair of the Southwest Border Security Task Force and work with state troopers. I work with Border Patrol. I work with local sheriffs. You've seen that in some of our advertisements. We absolutely need that, but we also need to make sure that we have a system that is accountable, that is equal, that is just, and that is fair to every New Mexican. And we need to give those folks an opportunity to make sure that if they are involved in bad activities, they have an opportunity at a better life. Now, that's the difference between me and my opponent.
Thank you both. We have reached the conclusion already of tonight's debate. It is now time for closing statements. You will each have 1 minute to make your final case to voters. As per the outcome of our coin toss earlier, Congresswoman Yvette Herrell, you will go first.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Matt and Tessa. What a great debate. And you can see there's a stark contrast between me and my opponent. In fact, I haven't had to change my position on anything, nor have I had to take down my Twitter feed or my Facebook post or my podcast. You know why? Because I've served this district with honesty and integrity. And in November, Gabe nor I will be the most important people on the ballot. You will be, because what's at stake is voting for your livelihood, your family, your kids, your grandkids, your way of life, your values. Freedom is on the ballot. So what I would ask is that you keep praying for our country and our great state. And when you go to cast your vote, I humbly ask for your support and your vote on November 8th. And God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you very much, Representative. Gabe Vasquez, your closing remarks.
Muchas gracias. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes. My name is Gabe Vasquez, and I humbly ask for your support because as somebody who is one of us, somebody that comes from a working class family, somebody who has understood the value of hard work in this country, we need change. Now, Congresswoman Herrell hasn't been able to do that during her time in Congress. She's voted against everything that matters to us. health care for veterans, lowering the price of insulin, making sure that mothers have access to baby formula. It's unconscionable. Now, Congresswoman Herrell said 2 years ago that she would work across the aisle to provide solutions for our country. She hasn't done that. We need an economy that works for everybody, whether those are our farm workers, our fast food workers, those are people who are working every day to empower New Mexico. We need to make sure we have a working class champion in New Mexico that will help support our dreams, that will help fulfill our American dreams. That includes creating a fair economy, a fair immigration system, a good healthcare system that provides for everybody, and healthy families all across this big, beautiful district that I would be so happy to represent. I ask for your support. My name is Gabe Vasquez. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. And with that, we're at the end of our congressional debate.
We hope you will join us for our Congressional District 3 debate next Friday. And of course, we always hope that you will join us for the Night Beat tonight at 10.